Hi, so I just wanted to make a video about some of the impressions of the brothers Karamazov, which I just finished reading the other day. I guess I have a couple of things I'd like to say to preface this sort of I don't know. I'm not sure if I would call this a review or maybe just a little bit of like a rambling video, or I guess like scattered thoughts, I suppose. I guess that's a preface in and of itself, but um I would guess I say the first major point here is that I'm not a very talented speaker. I have troubles getting like what I'm thinking into verbal form, and I guess this sort of style video that I'm making right now is much more informal. I don't have a script. I just have a list of bullet points of potential things I could talk about. I'm not sure how it'll work out, but yeah. Anyways, so I'm trying my best, but I'm not really good at speaking off the cuff. And I guess the other point I wanted to say is I'm a little bit sick at the moment, so I apologize if that's like annoying. Um, but enough about me. So the Brothers Karamazov is definitely a work whose reputation has preceded it. From what I understand, it's not as widely read in Russia. It's definitely a big book, a doorstopper, as they say. But in the United States, it has a pretty decent reputation. It's widely considered one of the greatest books ever written. It was published from 1879 to 1880 in a series of like installments in a Russian newspaper, of course, by the author Fyodor Dostoevsky, who am I, whom I would probably say is my favorite author. Specifically, I think Notes from Underground is probably one of the greatest and perhaps most consequential works ever written. Hopefully, I'll do videos on that potentially over the summer. Anyways, so I guess, yeah. So the Brothers Karamazov is obviously centered around the Karamazov family, which comprises the patriarch Fyodor Pavlovich and his sons Alosha, Ivan, and Dmitri, as well as I guess you would say, the unacknowledged Smerdyakov. And yeah, so the book is largely centered around their relationships to each other, I guess I'll say, and sort of major questions of the day, sort of timeless questions, actually, I would say, about faith versus reason. I don't know, justice, a whole bevy of things, family. Sorry, I didn't mean to pause. I'm trying to. When I'm editing this, I'll try to leave it as intact as possible. So I'm sure there'll be a lot more pauses than normal. And I've never done a book review before, not even like a written one, so I'm not quite adept at doing this. So this is the first time, and once again, I apologize. Okay. Um, what's potentially interesting about this book is that there's some murmur. It seems some conflicting information at this. The Brothers Karamazov was in some ways meant to be volume one of a much larger work that Dostoevsky was planning, which I think is interesting. In some ways, I would say that the ending is a little bit ambiguous, more ambiguous than his other works. I guess I should say. I guess I've read Crime and Punishment, The Idiot, Demons, The Double, Notes from Underground. Um, yeah, so I've read most of his major works. I guess the only one I haven't read is The Adolescent. Anyways, so I feel like I have, I guess, some sort of idea, some familiarity with this author, but I would definitely not say I'm an expert. Um, I've just read them all once. This is my first time reading The Brothers Karamazov. Um, anyways, where was I going with this? So yeah, there's a potential sequel, which I find pretty interesting. Um, Allegedly, it would have to do with a regicide or the murder of the Tsar. Um, I just find that interesting. Sorry, I probably should stick to the brothers Karamazov by itself. Okay, so I guess I'll just give some thoughts about like the overall structure of the book. And here, like I said, I'm not really good at expressing myself in a coherent manner. Um, but I'll say about the book, The Brothers Karamazov. I think it's perhaps the most complete or the most unified of his works. I would say probably on the macro level, in the sense that I guess there's. I feel like he knew more where he was going than in his other works. People often cite like The Idiot as a work that he was sort of like going like creating. He wasn't quite sure where it was going. He was kind of just discovering along with the characters and demons. That book got kind of messed up by the censors at the time. So he basically had to change his main character due to them censoring a critical chapter of demons. Um, yeah, I would think Crime and Punishment, probably the Brothers Karamazov is probably his most, I guess, unified work. But specifically with the brothers, I would say there's more explicit recurring themes. The everything is permitted line is probably the most obvious and potent example. But like I said, I think this cohesion is more on the macro level. I would say that the characters are harder to nail down, um, especially some of the side characters. I'm not sure if what Dostoevsky's intentions were. He seems to have almost, I don't want to say forgot about them, but wasn't quite sure what to do with them. I think of the landowner Maximov and the relative to Fyodor Pavlovich's first wife, Miasov. Oh, by the way, I'm not pronouncing these in the completely Russian way, so to speak. Like I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Karamazov or Ivan instead of Ivan, but whatever. I'm just gonna just gonna say it in my way. Perhaps it's less sophisticated, but anyways, or even people like Madame Koklakova, who I think was more of a comic character, and I think Maximov became one as well. I just think they're interesting. They only appeared in super short parts, and I guess I would say like for Maximov, for example, he appeared in the beginning. He was just kind of at the monastery, and then he kind of disappeared for most of the novel, and then showed back up in Dmitri's spree, and then he was just living with Grushenka. Yeah, just odd a little bit. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, what his intentions were with these characters. But that is to say, if I was being more specific, I sort of wonder if he creates characters, so they exist, but he doesn't necessarily know where some of these side characters are gonna go, but he just likes having them in case he needs people to do certain things. You know what I'm saying? Like it's useful that he exists out there, um, just in case if he needs him for something. Kind of reminds me of Bulkington from Moby Dick. Anyways, okay. So, and with a lot of his works, I would say, speaking of like the main characters here, obviously everyone knows that his characters are sort of like, I don't want to say mouthpieces for certain ideas or positions. And I mean, this has its pros and cons, I guess, based on the inclinations of the reader. because in that sense, it's depending on the work. I would say that some of his major characters are perhaps less, I don't even say personable, as they are sort of paragons of ideas. Like I said, and this might sound trite, but I would say that if we're talking about the main characters, the brothers, of course, I guess almost I guess their last name is sort of a sort of a character of itself. The Karamazovs, in the sense that you know who the Karamazovs are. They're, I guess you'd say, sensualists. But if we're trying to, for example, if we're trying to ask like who Alosha is, if we're trying to discern who his character is as like a person, I would say traits wise, it's a little bit more difficult if we were just to assess him on his own. So I mean he's like the proto monk. He's very religious, and so he acts in like a religious manner. But what do we really know about him beyond that? Do we really know him? But through him being a Karamazov, I guess that would reveal more facets of his character than him by himself would, if that makes sense. Being part of that clan sort of imbues him with more characteristics than I guess he would have in a vacuum. So I guess in that sense, the family name is more of a is more revelatory than any individual member of it. Anyways, sorry. Um, just I'll just give some general commentary on some of the overall structure of the work. So now that I've read pretty much all of his major works except The Adolescent, I've kind of noticed some patterns in the way Dostoevsky, I guess, formulates his work, or some, I guess, common threads or patterns, so to speak. Um, just things that he includes. Like I would say that there's certain like anecdote chapters permeating through his works, and what I mean by that is like stories relayed by someone else, like chapters that are dedicated to like reminiscence or a story within a story, basically. In this um, in this book, the famous one is the Grand Inquisitor, which I'll get to hopefully shortly. um, but I guess the point I'm bringing this up for is because well, we'll get to that in a second, I guess. I'm sorry. Okay. So there's anecdote chapters in Dostoevsky books, and I would say he has a whole bunch of ideas or debates that he's perhaps like he wants to have his characters argue, so he sort of sets them up in that regard. And I think the caliber or relevancy of the specific Dostoevsky novel sort of depends on the debates or conversations that Dostoevsky wanted to write in the book. Okay, so now I guess I'll be a little bit sacrilege or potentially I guess I don't know, set people off or destroy my credibility here. When I say based on my first impressions of the brothers Karamazov, I'm not quite sure exactly why it has I would say become such a phenomenon unto itself. It's definitely brilliant, and probably yes, one of the greatest books of all time. But it's very difficult to find authors that compare to Dostoevsky's depth and I guess understanding of human nature. But in comparison to his other works, I'm not quite seeing any singular or unique profoundness within the Brothers Karamazov that justifies its often repeated, um, I guess, subtitle being the greatest Dostoevsky novel of all time. I don't know if this is like a an impression of the work that sort of snowballed over time to become I don't know, I or if this is the only one that most people have read. And this goes back to what I was saying. I think the anecdote chapters or the stories within the stories are usually the most among the most powerful parts of each Dostoevsky novel. And the Grand Inquisitor, which I'll go more into, is definitely, maybe it even is the best one, but it's the other ones are very good in his other works as well. And as for like the debates that Dostoevsky sets up in this novel, I think some of them are perhaps a little less compelling to a modern readership, especially in the United States. Like the obvious one I think of would be like the ecclesiastical court debate, and probably I don't know, is that the second chapter? I don't think like that's an even fathomable idea of people submitting to I guess a Catholic court instead of a criminal court in modern societies, like something that nobody's even like considered. That's just like an example. Um, I don't know. I guess this is a mostly secular Western country. I believe that perhaps it's even 50% of Gen Z is quote atheists, but somehow also vaguely spiritual at the same time. I'm not sure. I'm speaking off the cuff. Forgive me. I don't know. I guess I would say like the religious nature or the religious focus of this work, and specifically, especially the particular type of Christianity, Orthodox, is um, for a modern reader from the United States perhaps less understandable than I don't know, the politics and socialism debates and like demons, for example, or even I guess yeah, treatise on guilt and liberalism and utilitarianism, egoism from Crime and Punishment, but I don't know. I mean, no doubt about it. The Brothers Karamazov obviously is a genius work by a genius man. I'm just saying, in comparison to his other works, I'm not quite sure why it has achieved quite the particular renown it has. But I enjoyed it. I really did enjoy it. It's a really it's a really good work. Okay, I guess I don't think I could get through anyone could get through a Brothers Karamazov video without at least touching on the Grand Inquisitor. Um, it's really interesting stuff. I think it's a tough chapter. I don't even the ideas that one has to confront in it um, are tough, and I think they can be applied broadly and have a very far reach. Like the idea of I guess people sort of rejecting free will, People who hate God because they were allowed to fail, who grow resentful, and who see mockery and them being allowed to mockery and them being as the way they are, who see it all as a big joke that someone's laughing at the suffering and the failure of the people. And likewise, those who reject God, maybe they don't even necessarily deny the existence of God, they just reject his vision. They think they can do better, or they think they can do what God preached better in their own way, which I guess is what the Grand Inquisitor is supposed to represent. Sorry, I'm just thinking. I think this can be applied to, in some ways, this is I can't deny it. This probably is the most important chapter of the book. I think you can replace God in what I said with other things as well. I think it has wide application, but I'm not sure if you should. Maybe. Sorry, I'm being terribly obscure. That is to say, people who hate their parents because they think that nobody saved them, so to speak. Yeah, like I said, 'cause they were allowed to fail. People who hate their society. And of course, I guess what one of the broader things that Dostoevsky was against was his interpretation of the socialism, which he thought were trying to bring heaven on earth and all the rest. And he rejected the dogmatic materialism, which sort of dominates the West today. Which I guess the argument from the Grand Cardinal is that all that people need is bread, at least before all the bread before virtue, or perhaps just bread. And I guess Dostoevsky, Volosha, and probably the Elder Zazima are trying to say that there's a certain spiritual sickness or internal war, I guess it would be in the mind of Ivan, for example, that is sort of begotten or sort of born out of those who perhaps accept the idea of a creator but just reject his world, reject the suffering in it. It's just interesting how the cardinal hates the Christ for coming back. How dare he abandon us? And I will say, broadly, probably to the expense of people offending people, but I will say, just as a side note here, that I've seen that some people, or some publishers even publish this chapter by itself, or some people just read this chapter. This is hard to justify or look into, I guess. The idea of doing that, reading this chapter or publishing it by itself is a little bit, I'm trying not to exaggerate, a little bit abhorrent to me. Um, I think it kind of misses the point. And there's two sort of meta comments on that, or maybe I'll just maybe I won't preface that. Maybe I don't feel comfortable saying them all. Um, I think part of the reason. So I've already said that this chapter is brilliant, of course, but I think it's sort of read by itself or cited so often incorrectly. That is, without the rest of the context of the rest of the book. I think there's two, but these definitely aren't the entire class of readers of Dostoevsky, kind of in general, and this chapter in particular. I would say, for lack of better terminology here, people who are drawn to this chapter, because it's edgy, so to speak. I kind of noticed the character from Demons, who takes his life and has I guess you'd say, philosophy about it. The man god, Kirillov. By the way, that man god stuff is brought up later in the brothers Karamazov. And that's interesting in and of itself. Maybe I'll make a video about that sometime. Um, Anyways, I noticed that there are certain types of people who are sort of drawn like flies to this sort of edgy or perceived edginess and heavy topics, just by virtue of them being, I guess you would say, taboo or heavy topics. Almost like true crime, but not quite. And I guess there's another class of reader who is almost drawn to these works in sections by the aesthetics or like the external renown that they have, which kind of builds on itself. I mean by that's popular and people talk about it, so people go into it for that reason, and therefore it becomes more popular and more people talk about it until it becomes absurd or ridiculous, even greatly exaggerated, perhaps. Anyways, I guess what I'm trying to say is that everyone knows the Grand Inquisitor, even if they haven't read it. But if you know about the life of the Elder Zosima, and if they do, most of them don't care about it. Anyways, I'll just gonna give some. Let's talk about the translation now, okay? Okay, so I read the Michael Katz translation, which was published over the summer of 2023. That is. I have not read this book before, like I said, so I have not read any of the other translators, but I read the preface that Katz wrote for his edition, and I'm kind of broadly familiar with the Translator Wars, as they're informally known, with Russian works, and I'm mostly a student of that body, or familiar with this sort of brand. I haven't read widely into the French works, but I've read quite a bit of Russian stuff, The Master and Margarita, some Tolstoy, Gogol. So I'm steeped a little bit into the Russian Translator Wars. So for the Brothers Karamazov, I believe the first English translation was by Constance Garnett in 1912, and it's often characterized as sort of translated into Victorian English, so to speak. And it is said that she took some liberties in cutting out some of the sections that she thought were not great, or dialogue that was too confusing or redundant in her view. And she's been her translation. I mean, it was the bedrock. It was the first English translation, so all others, in a sense, are at least familiar with hers. She did lay the groundwork for later translations, so of course it can't falter too much. And so I think it's often said that she tried to make this Russian novel like an English novel. And of course, I'm not impugning Garnett, but then the other major translation would be this translation that came out in the 90s by this couple, this English and Russian couple, literal couple, not just like partners, like married, Richard Pevere and Larissa Volokhonsky. And I've read their translations for all the rest of his works except Crime and Punishment, which I read the Macduff translation. Yeah. And they're sort of characterized, at least by Katz, as sort of being too literal, or that's the justification for his translation, in the sense that they tried to translate Dostoevsky's syntax and sentences and grammar a little bit too much, which Katz argues comes across as awkward and stilted and perhaps not quite grammatical. And so Katz says that he's trying to strike a middle ground between the, I guess you would say, more liberal interpretation of Dostoevsky by Garnett and the perhaps much more literal translation of Pevere and Volokhonsky. And so how does this work? Well, I think it's probably very incredible difficult. So I give him much commendations, Katz that is, for his translation. It's like I said, it's a massive work. It's the edition I had. It's the Katz translation is like 900 pages long. Overall, I liked it. I will say there's some like modern phraseology that I was a little bit jarring for me. I don't have any examples off the top of my head. I also don't really take notes in books, but I guess for the purposes of reviews, I guess that'd certainly be useful. Stuff like saying, like, the cat's out of the bag. I know there's much more better examples, but I didn't write them down. Anyways, it was just a little bit jarring to see stuff like that. Also, just another comment. I'm not hating. I just noticed there's like I don't think I've ever seen this before. Like this quotation mark pattern that Katz did, in the sense that, or maybe I've just never noticed it somehow. If the same character is speaking in like multiple paragraphs, he'll have the first quotation mark like at the beginning of the paragraph, but he won't put the second one at the end, even if someone's speaking. And then in the next paragraph, it's the same character speaking. He has the the first quotation mark again at the beginning. And only if a different character speaks, or if there's like a description or something, he'll add the final quotation mark to bookmark it. But like I said, like if it's multiple paragraphs, the end of the first paragraph, or even however long between the first paragraph when the character speaks and the last paragraph, there's no second quotation mark. I've never seen something like that. I mean, now I'm just like super rambling and it's probably not, I don't know, understandable. I apologize. I just thought that was strange. I'm not hating. So I can't really, I guess, judge Katz translation until I've really read like other ones. I mean, but with that in mind, I think it was definitely very good. I guess it's probably too recent for much, scholars to have much say about it. So I'd be curious about that. All right, so I'll just cap off this video with, I guess, maybe talking about some favorite or notable parts. Um, I quite enjoyed the Nietzsche chapter where where he tries to procure money. It was really fun, and find Grushenka, and that's where he winds up getting arrested. By the way, going back to what I said, really throughout the video about how some people interpret Dostoevsky kind of as like this all dark and gloom person. I think I think that's only half true. I think Dostoevsky is a half tragic writer and half comedy writer, and some people kind of sadly miss that nuance. But he's hilarious. He's incredibly funny. He knows how to set up a scene incredibly well. I know there's that Nabokov criticism, which I think there is some. I don't want to say truth to the criticism, but truth to part of it. So Nabokov says that Dostoevsky would have been a much better playwright than novelist. I do think that Dostoevsky would have been an incredible playwright. I'm not sure if better than novelist. They're just different things. That's a big claim. But I think he would have been a great playwright. He knows how to create these these absolutely ridiculous, I guess, like scenes, and they are almost play like. I would say that some of the parts, particularly in like the first half, are even very Shakespearean. I would say. I think like Smerdyakov playing the guitar, it's great stuff. Um, I think he would be an excellent playwright, and this is throughout all of his works. Where all these characters will come together for whatever reason, they'll end up in the same place, and scandal or absolute chicanery will ensue. It's usually great. It's fantastic. Or there'll be like, or it'll be like the Nietzsche chapter will just be rolling and getting more and more ridiculous and intricate. It's great. It's really fun. Other chapters, I would say Ivan's meetings with Smerdyakov. Those are masterful. So near the end, Ivan, yeah, well, he meets with Smerdyakov 3 times, and well, I don't know how many of you guys have read the novel or not. I hope you guys do. It's definitely a commitment. I think I would recommend reading Crime and Punishment first. Anyway, I'm sorry. Getting back to what I was saying, the Ivan Smerdyakov meetings. It's really clever. The Okay, so I will say I don't know. I don't want to spoil it for you guys. So one of the characters um, doesn't know. So Ivan doesn't know if Smerdyakov is guilty or not. If he's speaking in hypotheticals or if he's um, admitting culpability. And Smerdyakov doesn't know if Ivan is um, trying to play the entire blame of the crime onto him, is trying to get their story straight, is acting coy. And so them trying to like figure each other out and like what the other knows and is trying to say and trying to like it's incredibly psychological. It's very fun. It's very masterful. It's great. And hot take, by the way. I think anyway. Okay, rather whoever committed the patricide, whoever killed Fyodor Pavlovich, I do think Ivan is kind of guilty. Not directly, but indirectly. Anyways, and just I can't. I mean, there's a lot more I could say about that. Um, yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that. Um, and finally, just another thing worth mentioning. I think the final speeches by the prosecutor and the St. Petersburg attorney at the trial are pretty interesting as well, just rhetorically even. Um, yeah. All right. I really hope that people can kind of understand what I'm saying. Not because what I'm saying is particularly profound or original in what I'm trying to say. I'm just not very good at expressing it. And please, by all means, if you have criticism, please, I'm begging you to criticize what I'm saying. But please, please, by God, just justify it, please. Or please, or by all means, please, share your own thoughts on the book. Um, I seriously would love to foster discussion here. Um, I'm sure this is. I'm not even sure how long this is. Oh my God, 40. Oh my God. Okay. All right. Well, I better cut this off. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate this video. And like I said, okay, I'm just gonna cap this off. I'm sorry that I'm a terrible speaker. I don't think I've spoken for this long and like uninterrupted uh, for months. Okay, thank you for watching. Thank you. I seriously hope you have a good one. Goodbye.